Welcome back to the President's Forum podcast, where we explore innovation in education. Today, we are lucky to be joined by Josh Thorpe. Josh is the author of AI for Students, a comic-style book that demonstrates several unusual ways to use generative AI to think more, not less, in education. Thorpe is an academic skills advisor and learning developer at Scotland's University of Stirling, and he writes, speaks, and consults on academic literacy, AI in education, and concrete protocols for better learning experiences. To learn more, listeners can visit joshthorpe.com or promptlybooks.com. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on. Pleased to meet you, Cameron.
Yeah, you as well. So, Josh, in your book and a recent article in Inside Higher Ed, what can you tell us about students' current perspectives on generative AI?
Well, in my experience, they've definitely evolved over the past couple of years since, November 22 when ChatGPT went live and everybody in education sort of panicked. Definitely seeing more willingness in students to talk about their experiences and their perspectives on the use of Gen AI. At first, I think students were worried that us educators would prohibit and moralize and just worry them into not wanting to talk about those tools, those technologies. But now I think students finally are ready to do it because many of us have brought it up in class ourselves and are in fact even developing ways that students can use some of the technologies in various situations in the curriculum. So I'm finding quite a diverse range of perspectives, actually. Everything from those who have really still not tried any Gen AI technologies, maybe would prefer not to, in fact, which I totally understand. It's a lot, right? I mean, our information environment in university is already so rich with possibilities, and students have to juggle quite a lot. It's already difficult enough to figure out your role in the whole knowledge economy, consuming and producing ideas and organizing knowledge, and without yet another user interface and whole raft of problems and questions and so on. So there are those people, and I get it. And then there are those that, of course, just full on using the tools to cheat or to do something close to cheating that's probably not so great for themselves as learners. And then there are students who have a really sophisticated and reflective practice, who have read a lot of critique, who have read a lot of sort of advice, and have practiced a lot, so that they've now come to a place where they have quite a good sense of what the tools can do, cannot do, what the problems with them might be, and then just how they want to interact with those tools.
And it sounds to me like that third attitude or perspective is a healthy one. Your article talks about dropping the notion of AI as a magic power or tool. So can you explain to us what you mean by that and give your vision for what a more appropriate attitude towards Gen AI in the education space would be?
Yeah, so this magic power thing, or the idea that Gen AI is a tool, slightly different things, but very common, in how we use the technologies and how we talk about them. So magic power is more like, it's kind of like the replicator on Star Trek, right? Like Earl Grey hot computer, Earl Grey hot. Just make it so, do something for me. This is the kind of the fantasy. Like a genie in a lamp or something like this. It's a very tempting, lazy, greedy kind of approach, and I totally get it. I'd love, and if and when we have artificial general intelligence, this may be more of the interaction that we're having, and then that presents a different sort of relation. The present technology is not really there, but then the AI as a tool thing is like, so if the AI as a magic power overestimates its abilities, AI as a tool underestimates its complexity. And you often hear this trope of people saying AI is just a tool. And it's this kind of toss away phrase that disavows the complexity of the technology or our relationship to it, or disavows the obligation to have a critical discussion, to use caution when using these tools, and so on. So that's why I try to stay away, even though I've just done it, from using the word tool to describe generative AI. And so in the article that you mentioned, I am treating generative AI more as an environment, more as a space to work within. There's lots of metaphors. I mean, you think of it as a study buddy, or as a frame, as a stage to practice on, like a virtual stage and a virtual audience. So there's a lot of different ways you could think of it that complicate the interaction. But the way that the article sort of advocates is to really preference the interaction. So to treat our use of these technologies in ways that make us think more, that make us use our imagination more, that provoke us to do the thinking rather than the other way around.
And could you give us some examples of how you've seen the implementation of that kind of process and mindset?
Well, yeah, I mean, in my own life, the way that I stumbled upon this was because I began with that first usage, the AI just as a button you press sort of thing, and presto, it produces stuff. AI as a content mill. That's my first usage, right? So write me a poem, plan my trip for me, whatever it might be. And some of those uses are good. And I mean, if you want to know how to caramelize onions, it's great. But I asked AI to write a joke for me in the style of Jerry Seinfeld about chickens. That was one of the first things I did. The results I got back were kind of mediocre. They're fun, but mediocre. And I noticed that I had to edit the results to actually get a better joke. So that was my first clue that there was an interaction required here. And then I flipped that model and I said, well, I'm going to tell you a joke and then you critique me. And that sort of totally changed the ballgame because I was instigating the sort of creative moment. And, the chatbot gave me okay critique. It wasn't brilliant, but it was something to go on, something for me to think about and chew on. And that developed into like a cycle of, well, I'm going to try to improve the joke and then get more feedback and so on. Now, this is something that I wouldn't do with anyone else. I wouldn't subject anyone else to that, and I wouldn't feel comfortable taking the risk either of looking like an idiot. And sure enough, my joke telling hasn't really gotten better. But the good thing is that I've had more fun with it. And I found that using AI this way, I would instigate something like that and just spend a few minutes with it and then carry that thought through my day. And I could be, washing my dishes later and still thinking about the rhythm of a joke or something like this. Still thinking about, Seinfeld and what made that so funny. But then more pragmatically, for students, I mean, there's all kinds of things that students are not necessarily trying, like little interactive things that in my researches, students are not really identifying. So things like just using AI chatbots to practice vocabulary, for example, to do active recall, where, I'm going to try to remember the definition of a term, or these types of very, very basic study buddy type activities. But even more complex, like brainstorming or kind of clarifying ideas, talking through ideas. I've spoken with a dyslexic student who really has difficulty going from ideas, very, dedicated student, to putting things on the page, but was able to use a Gen AI chatbot to talk through those ideas in their own language, with their own flow of thought, and then ask the chatbot to simply use their own phrases and words, but to suggest a logical sort of order, just putting order to my own ideas, sort of thing, and that can make a fantastic difference for somebody. And I've been surveying people, and one of the things that I'm hearing most often is practicing critical thinking, and this, of course, it's something that people really struggle with in education. Students, I think it's a great failure of higher education or all education that we just kind of throw people. I mean, not everybody, but we tend to throw people into these situations where they're just expected to sink or swim. Critical think, guys. Let's hear your critical thinking. You can do it. But actually, it's a very complicated activity that involves not just knowledge, but a lot of emotional and psychological framing. You have to kind of be prepared to take risks, and you have to feel safe in order to take risks and challenge authorities and all these kinds of things. And not everybody is equally prepared to do those things. So one usage of Gen AI is to practice those things in sort of low risk scenarios. Play, in other words.
Yeah, I like it. That makes a lot of sense. Well, Josh, thank you for meeting with us today. Again, if you want to see more from Josh, you can look at his book, AI for Students, or visit joshthorpe.com. Josh, is there anything else you want to leave with us before we sign off?
Oh, just an invitation, I guess. I would love people, obviously, to check out the book. But if anyone would like to reach out and work on any of these things, I'd love to study just how useful some of these protocols or approaches might be for students in real learning situations.